So yes, I'm head of the physics and astronomy department here. But I must say that I'm here to talk about Twitter. My tweeting is not a professional activity in my view. I do it for fun. Now I'm going to qualify that with some comments that I make. But I think the key to me that it provides in many different contexts is a permeability between different communities and within into organisations and out of organisations, and I'll give some examples of that. So what I'm going to do really is give you a history of how I got dragged into social media. It's not something that I didn't really ever have this moment where I sat down and thought I must do this. This is something I didn't even think I had goals. But I got into it initially because there was a financial crisis in my research, and Lord Drayson, who you may remember was Science Minister under Labour, was pretty active on Twitter. He still is, and mostly talks about racing cars now, but he used to talk about science. He was the Science Minister. And there was an article in the Sunday Telegraph. I work at CERN in Geneva, which is this big lab, and there was an article in the Telegraph that the UK may not be able to afford to pay a subscription to CERN. And Brian Cox and Lord Drayson got into an argument on Twitter about this, and I thought, I don't know what Twitter is, but I'd better find out. So I did. So that's how I got into it, and actually I got a lot of followers very quickly, partly thanks to those two, because they both passed on some of my tweets, and they had a lot of followers. So within a very short space of time, actually, because of the position I was in, I ended up with 200 or 300 followers, which is a reasonable number. More to the point, about half of those were actually people, science journalists and people in the mainstream media or public engagement professionals. And the other half were science fans who were keen on CERN, basically. So I also have a blog, as Anthony mentioned. I had a blog on WordPress before. It's now on The Guardian, but it's pretty much the same as it always was. And I realised around that time also that I was writing the blog. I was getting nothing like the hits that Anthony gets. And now it's more because of The Guardian, I guess. But at the time I was getting a typical post would get maybe 1,000 reads. But then I would realise that of those, that was a very engaged audience, and I would get a lot of comments from people who were in the research councils, who were in government, who were in The Guardian and The Independent and The Times and the mainstream media. It was actually having quite a big, and also international scientists, heads of international labs. I'd meet at a professional meeting and they go, I read your blog. Really? You were one of 200 people who read that particular post. So that was a message, a lesson in targeting, and Twitter I think does that par excellence. So you really know who you're engaged with. It's very good at that. And one can choose the level of engagement. So what it does is this business of permeability. It made the whole mainstream media scene to me, and also at some level government, more permeable than it had been, and in turn it made these mysterious Illuminati who work at CERN and are going to destroy the world a little more permeable to the people who were concerned about that. I think some of them were quite relieved to find out a wife and children, and therefore was unlikely to be keen on blowing up the world. Seriously, I had that come in. I mean, it's like, what do they think scientists are? But it has an effect of humanising in both directions. It humanised journalists to me. I had a very actually confrontational attitude about journalism. I was very nervous about it. As an academic, maybe particularly as a scientist, but I think as an academic in general, actually, definitely as an academic in general, that's famous authors or Mary Beard or someone. It can be very bad. You pop up into the media for a brief moment, you get traduced, and then you've got no comeback. You've got no way of doing it. Now, it was very refreshing to me to find out that people like Mark Henderson and Ian Sample, who were the Times and Guardian science journalists at the time, for example, had a kind of peer group. There's a peer group of competent journalists who respect each other's opinion about science, and they don't want to traduce you, and if they do, and you have a few hundred followers, which is a lot of their peer group, and you say, that was wrong, that's not what I said, that's not what I meant, then it's very empowering. It makes me feel, I've been on the Today programme a couple of times. I was terrified, but I was a lot less terrified because I knew that if I said something I didn't mean, I could go on Twitter straight after and say to 5,000 people, I didn't mean to say that wasn't what I meant. So, as it happened, I didn't need to. It was good to know. It probably stopped me from saying something I didn't mean to say. It may sound a bit grandiose to say that they care about what you say, but actually, I mean, the BBC website, Jonathan Amos, I think it was, put up, you remember the faster than light neutrinos, anyone? Last year there was a story about faster than light. It went up on the BBC website immediately. The LHC discovers faster than light neutrinos. The LHC is my experiment. It's nothing to do with neutrinos. So I immediately tweeted, that's wrong, to all the people who were tweeting this on. and it was fixed within 30 minutes. Now, I wasn't the only one doing that. In fact, Brian Cox retweeted it, which probably helped. But nevertheless, it really, it fixed it. The BBC apologised and changed the headline, changed the story, and made it correct. Because it was an experiment at CERN, but it wasn't ours, and it mattered to me, because I knew it was wrong. So that's an example. It gives you some follow-up, and as I say, it's an example of permeability. This media no longer looked like an impenetrable club of people who occasionally would deign to put me on their programme. It was more like someone I was in a conversation with, and that makes a huge difference. And I think, from the point of view, as I say, of scientists engaged at UCL or at CERN, it also, the other half of the followers, in fact the vast majority of my followers now, are people who are just interested in the science and in UCL and what's it like being a scientist, what are you actually doing, what you're going to do next. So that permeability, I think, works for them as well. I mean, you should get one of them up here to tell you why they follow me. But I think that's why they see what it's like, the life of a scientist, which is a lot of, is what Anthony writes as the life of an engineer and an academic in his blog, and it's also what I write in my blog at some level. But Twitter's more immediate, more trivial in many ways, but it's more continuous and it's more engaged in some ways as well. I also, of course, advertise my blog and talks and things that I do there. I do use it to get information a lot, as well as distribute information. It's a way of constructing your own newsfeed, which can have everything in there from your brother through to, well, your brother would be in any newsfeed, I guess, but it could be family and friends, and it can be the Guardian Science, and it can be UCL news, and it can be whatever granularity you like, and you can put them all in your newsfeed, and you get news very quickly. And I've honestly found out about important science results in my area quicker on Twitter than by reading the archive, which is where we distribute our papers, which is also very immediate. It's daily, it's updated daily. But Twitter, well, you get people live blogging from a seminar you're meant to go to, and you find out you should have gone. It's quite good. So it's professionally useful in that way. You can see that I'm mixing a lot of these are professional uses, but actually I'm doing it for fun. I never went in there to say I should do any of these things. I've evolved this usage that way. With the blog, I went in saying, I know why I'm writing a blog, that's an entirely different matter, but with Twitter, it was really just an organic process. I don't pretend Facebook's private. I still put public stuff up there, and I don't put any personal data on there that I don't expect to be leaked. But nevertheless, that's where most of the new babies and the christenings and things like that occur on Facebook, not on Twitter. Although I do put birthday cakes on Twitter. Because I decorate them, and it's just fun. Twitter is just fun. I'm sorry, that's what it is. You get personal engagement with people, down to the level of one person who followed me, one of my earliest followers on Twitter, who is not a professional scientist or media person, turned up to a talk, I gave it the welcome, and they baked me a load of gingerbread Daleks. It's just fun. Anyway, nice. The only other thing I would say is that I think one has to be careful. I tweet in airport lounges. I tweet after dinner. Which is a euphemism for sometimes tweeting when I've had a little too much to drink. I swear very rarely. I think the last time was over the weekend with the segregated audience thing at UCL, which is something I try not to do, and that was a little intemperate perhaps, some of that, but it was good even in that situation. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but it was in the Provost newsletter. That was also good, that there were a bunch of people from UCL who could express their opinions on that without being UCL corporate, but it made UCL permeable, then it stopped UCL already being this kind of monolithic thing. In the end, Anthony tweeted some stuff and UCL News tweeted some stuff, so that was more official. My reaction was a personal one, as were several others from people at UCL. So that's a good example of making UCL permeable to the world, I would say. One has to be careful though. I wake up and I alternate between pride and cold sweats of terror, because I follow George Monbiot, and when he tweeted about Lord McAlpine and all the business with the Newsnight, I very nearly, after dinner and I had a couple of glasses of wine and I was very angry, and I very nearly tweeted something. And I actually thought, not out of fear, I just thought, hang on, I don't really know anything, this is not fair, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to look at it again in the morning, and I didn't tweet anything, and I'm so glad that I didn't. You have to be really careful. And I completely support Lord McAlpine's action, actually. I think he was right. So I'm terrified that I nearly did, and I'm also very proud that I didn't, because I wouldn't have said it in a pub, I wouldn't have said it to his face. I didn't know it, I wasn't adding any information, I knew nothing other than what I also heard on Twitter. So that was, you have to be, it's fun, and it's not work, and I do it when I'm relaxed, but you have to be careful that you're behaving properly even when you're relaxed. Because, I have a professional position here as well, and a reputation. And in the end, Twitter is a lot about reputation, and that mingles your personal and your professional reputation in a way that not everyone is comfortable with. mostly I am, but occasionally I get heebie-jeebies. So that's it. I think I would summarise what Twitter does mostly. I think it's permeability in all directions. It gives me an insight into other people's professions and lives. It gives other people an insight into mine, and I think it's very effective in that way. I don't use it as a corporate tool, I have to say.